Halloween. So we are actually 38 weeks today. We are here to share our childbirth class recap thoughts. We finished a 15-hour, 3-day, over the course of 3 weeks, childbirth course that was led by our birth team, which was so perfect because I have a feeling most people maybe take childbirth classes from someone else that they don't really know. I don't know. I actually have no idea what a normal childbirth class or a regular childbirth class is, so I have absolutely no reference. But I do know that this experience is probably very uncommon, the experience that we had with this class. So our midwife and our doula were both leading this class, and we were experiencing the class with 3 other couples that were around our due date. So we're actually the first in the window of the group.
We're first, and there's one 3 days after us, then a week after that,
and then one's December.
Mid-December, yeah.
And what was really cool and unanticipated was, so I thought everybody that was in the class was going to be a client of our midwife, planning probably a home birth, but there was actually one couple that was planning to go to the hospital and labor at home as long as they could until they needed to go to the hospital. And at first I was like, oh man, is this going to be a little awkward? Because isn't the class mostly talking about home birth stuff? And then it actually became so awesome and informative to hear how our midwife and our doula were giving tools and information to the other couple of how to really be informed and take control over the hospital experience, because from what I understand, there's so many practices in place that are just routine and they don't really, cater to each person. It's just like, this is a job, let's go, let's move through it. Whereas, the idea that we're, manifesting is, I want this to be so personal to us. I want this moment to be so personal. And so it was so great to see how even in the hospital there were little tips and tricks of how to handle the nurses, how to talk to the doctors,
you never know if we're going to be going to the hospital or not. We're open to that happening if it has to happen, and then to know that we can really have our feet grounded in the hospital room and still take ownership of that space and not have it be everything be dictated to us was nice.
Yeah, so it was a really, really awesome experience to have informations about both sides and not be so polarized in one view. And it also helped make it look approachable. Okay, we could handle that. We could handle that conversation. Or, oh, it's so good to know that we need to tell them, no, we don't want that, or ask for something else. Or it was just really, really stinking cool. But I think I'm just going to start right away with one of my biggest takeaways from the class was the amount of provoked questions that were given to us for homework and in the class for the 2 of us to explore together or even separately and discuss together. So before we even started the class, we had so many questions we got to fill out separately, and then we discussed our answers together. Stuff about being pregnant, stuff about sexuality between us, connections between us during pregnancy, and
sexuality of the pregnancy itself.
Yes, and so that was a big topic from day one.
This is all new to me. I don't think at least not many of the people that I've been surrounded by or talked to regarding birth or labor ever said anything about sexuality being a part of the labor experience, but it certainly can be, and babies are put in there and they come out the same spot, so it's it's a sexual, maybe not in the traditional way that we think of that, but it can be a sexual experience. And there are countless studies of women accelerating the labor process significantly or initiating it through sexual stimulation, whether that's with nipples or heavy kissing,
just intimacy,
making
dopamine,
out.
It was so beautiful.
It helps to relax the body, which is what helps to, obviously, the labor to continue. And if the woman is in a state of worrying about things or getting yelled at by other people around her or whatever, she might be holding on.
It's like you're about to fist me.
Fist you? Don't do that. That is not one of the recommended procedures.
But I mean, when you think about it, it seems obvious. Like the experience that goes into creating a child is so sensual. Well, it can be. It can be so, you know, when it's comfortable, when it's safe, when it feels secure, when it's explorative, when it's beautiful and loving, you know, it can be such this beautiful experience and connection between the two. And labor can be the same thing. There can be such a strong connection between us. There can be sensuality between us, romance, and so exploring the different ideas of if we were to create the ideal scenario of this environment, what kind of music would you want playing? What do you want the lighting to be? How do you want your partner to talk to you and touch you and encourage you? What kind of foods do you want? You know, when you have no restrictions, you know, when I think of, you know, labor before, it felt like I was restricted in a hospital and I could only do what was told I could do, you know? So
Jello and
just like stripping back that idea of like, wow, I can really create this experience to be beautiful. It's just rethinking it was all about rethinking how I've perceived birth from the way society and media has painted it all over for me to think it's excruciating. It's probably pretty quick. I mean, it's
just drug laden.
Yeah, I mean, the thoughts that I'm preparing for, it could be 3 days, you know, like that's the reality. It could be 3 days. So it was such a beautiful experience. And then for us to really talk about how we saw each other. There was so much about our relationship and so much about how we, especially for me, because this particular instance, it's like, okay, how can you best serve me in this moment? But I kept asking him, well, I remember after the first class, I was like, so if this situation was reversed, I know it's probably really hard to think this right now, but if you were the one giving labor and you were the one painting like the music you'd want playing and the things you'd want me to do and say and touch, like what would you want me to do? So it's even
we're
though
very different.
We're very different, and that was cool to know too.
We're very similar in the way that we experience difficult things, but we're very different in the way that we want to be treated by others. The more you can understand your partner's perspective, the better you can navigate communication and life in general with that person.
And that was such a major part of the first class, was just understanding how each other wants to be treated, how we handle pain, how we want to be touched during pain, pleasure, all those things. And then class 2 was going through the different stages of labor so that we really could understand how to recognize in ourselves what's happening, what stage we're at. Like, you know, you see in the movies, the water breaks and the woman goes into labor. Like that's like some people's water don't really break, or some people's water leaks over days.
I think most women's water is more leak than break.
It's not like this like, you know, it doesn't always happen like that. Yeah. And so a big part of this class is also stripping away all these ideas that you think, oh, it's gonna definitely look like this, and going, oh, it could look like this and this and this and this and this, and there's just so many variations, and that they're all normal and they're all okay. And it can get a little overwhelming to know that there's so many different variations, because then you're like, well, how do I know what to look for if there's so many different ways it could happen? But
that's what our birth team is for.
Yes, yeah.
And they helped us in this class to know the vast majority of, okay, this is happening. Does that mean we need to call, like, is this dangerous or is this normal? In the realm of normal.
Yes. And then we also worked on pain, which was one of the most like standout things for me during that experience. So what they did was they brought out ice cubes, and we got to each hold the ice cube for how long in our hand?
I think it was a minute.
Was it only a minute?
Each time was a minute, yeah.
Oh, because I think normal contractions are around a minute.
Yeah.
So the whole point was to stimulate a pain sensation for the length of time that a contraction would last. Mm-hmm. And they talked us through different ways to perceive the pain and work through the pain or navigate a pain.
The first one was really just recognizing what happens to you when you are in that, like physically and mentally when you're in that situation. So we held it for a minute. The idea was to be aware of what's happening, what you want to do.
Like focus on the pain. Like focus on how much it sucks. Just be like, this sucks. Like, don't do anything to distract and be like, oh, it's okay, it'll be over soon. Like, just focus on like how terrible whatever it is that's happening. Like, just go go into the terribleness of the pain.
It was like burning from the cold, like, you know.
And you're squeezing the ice cube.
Yeah.
You're not just like letting it sit there. Like the point is to really let the cold sensation like burn as much as it would. And then we went through, I think, 4 different other ways to put your energy in the moment. Whether it be focusing outward, different tactics, yeah.
Well, the first thing we did was just breathing, just literally deep breaths. That was it. And everyone had the same reaction after that minute, which was like, oh, that was much faster.
It went so much faster when we were just focusing on the breath.
Just focusing on the breath. And that might be the most supportive thing for some people. During that period of time, I actually went ahead not knowingly doing so, and I was focusing on just the physical feelings, like, oh, this is tingly, this is like that numb sensation that you get if your arm falls asleep, like those things. Just actually focusing on physically what's happening and identifying that and not labeling it as bad. That was the most supportive for me. It's obvious we've all experienced or watched or whatever people that do something that we've done that was really difficult or painful or something for us, and this person is experiencing it like it's no big deal. And you're like, how are they doing that? So it's obvious that our minds are super powerful and can have so much power over our body's experience of anything. And that's really what this was all about. The most supportive thing for you was focusing on something else in the room while you had that ice cube and putting your attention on that thing and like really diving into the curiosity of that thing.
But the last one we did was actually connection. I was holding it and you weren't holding it. And the last one was some sort of connection between us. So he like right away went behind my back. He started like relaxing my jaw because that's where I hold a lot of tension. He was breathing and helping me remind myself to breathe. And that for me was also way better than even the other one. Like our connection together, and almost everyone else in the room I think said the same thing. Like when our connection was there, like pain didn't exist. So it was just such a beautiful exercise to remember how much power we have over our experience.
There are women that we have seen in videos that laugh through the birth.
Or have like an orgasmic experience. Like orgasmic birth is a thing.
Crazy, but it's possible because it's happened.
Yeah. And then I think week 2 we also did positions. So learning about all the different positions that I might want to birth in and that he could help support my body.
Yeah.
Like literally putting me in different positions
Pressure
on the Bosu ball, on the couch, on the floor, like how to help massage me and like open me and soothe me. And then we just talked about how I'd want to be touched as well. So we navigated through that stuff too, which was so cool. And then our homework between week 2 and 3 was to talk to our families. So this was huge because there were a lot of questions that I asked my mom about my experience or her experience with my birth. So many really detailed questions about her experience. Well, I've heard her talk many times about the birth, but not many of these type of in-depth questions. And so it was to get this better understanding of what my mom was going through and then after that hearing her and not judging her, you know, like being very open and listening without judging her experience, just letting her express. And it was hard for her because it was 34 years ago and she's like, I don't really know. Oh my God, this is so long ago. And same thing with my dad too. He was there and he answered because some of the questions were about, you know, my dad's perspective of the moment as well. And then after that, we were prompted to just sit and meditate in that feeling of being the fetus and putting myself in utero and kind of experiencing what my mom was experiencing, because what happens is like the baby right now is really just experiencing what I'm experiencing. So I've never taken the time to think, wow, I really lived through my mother for this 9 months, 10-month process. And then in the beginning, so much of my experience was just their experience, you know? So then I got to meditate on all that information and just feel like, what was it like in utero? And it was a really, really beautiful experience to have that connection with my parents and then also be able to see like what I'd want to do similarly or what I'd want differently without any judging and just like listening and being open. And the more I hear about other people's experiences, the more I just use it as information and education to help me guide my own journey without having this like preconceived idea of how it's supposed to look or how it looked for someone else or could look like that for me. It's just using it as information and tools How did you feel when you connected with your parents about?
Yeah, I don't know. Mine was very happy and loving, and I was the easiest birth that my mom had, and I've known that for a long time. I didn't know specifics about if I was early or late, or
There were some
if there was
complications
something
with
else.
yours when you came out.
When I came out, I had high bilirubin, which is jaundice, and so they took me away from my mom and they put me under the bilirubin lights, which are basically just sun lamps. Really, it gives you vitamin D. And I was in the hospital for I think 5 days. I can't remember anymore, but a little bit longer than typical. But other than that, everything was really wonderful around my birth and my childhood, and yeah.
And of course, there's some people whose parents are not around when we were doing this exercise. So, it talked people through, if you don't have your family to reach out to and talk with, like, how can you meditate on these questions, and from any information or any family members that because is there any way you can, just work to find those answers by meditation. But I know that can be hard for some people that don't have.
Yeah, I mean, if your
people in
parent
their life
passes away, or if they were never really there, like
Yeah.
a lot of people have that experience.
Yeah. And what's really important about all these questions are not just to ask them and get answers and be like, oh, this is great, but to see what comes up. See if there's any blocks or fears or obstacles or discomforts that show up, because of how vulnerable and primal birth is. If these things aren't dealt with before, they could come up in labor and prevent the process being as smooth as it can be. And I've been reading books about this, and we've been talking about it a lot, is little emotional things that are harbored can surface and can prevent and maybe even cause complications during birth. So all these conversations that we've been having have really helped us flush through, like, okay, wow, this is something we haven't really talked about. Like, let's talk about this, because I don't want this to come up during birth and then I feel like panicked in the moment and I'm not ready to move into the next stage. Because I mean, when you think about it, we're moving into a whole nother universe of our life. Yeah. And so it's a major transformation. And I don't just think the body does it, like our mind, our hearts, this is giving our whole vessel the time to understand the transformation. This class really did, and these questions and taking the time. It's not just about the body going through something.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is about doing our best to be as present as we can be during this period, and that can help us to be more present during the actual labor and then after that as well. I think, so often in my life, I certainly just sort of go through life with my head in the clouds, like everything's great, yay. And I don't really take the time to sit down and just process what's happening.
So the last class was focusing on complications that could come up and how we would handle those complications at home, why we would need to go to the hospital, that was a very helpful, all the questions came out, all the fears came out. And then we did birth art, which was, you want to show our birth art?
Sure.
So what we did was we really took the time to meditate on any current fears after this conversation, after we talked through the complications. What are any fears?
It was even more than that, like the worst case scenario. Like, what is the worst possible situation? Go into that, really feel that, and then put that down.
So we did that. They gave us some time to do that. And then after we did that, they asked for us now to...
The reason to do that was to put it into the canvas and then let that go. And then the next thing was, okay, well, what is your best case scenario? Like, what you believe is going to happen.
Or like after letting that go, like what's the positive?
Yeah, what comes up? What's the other side of that?
Yeah, or the resolution of whatever that was. And then, but we couldn't start a new painting or canvas. We had to paint over the one that we did.
All right.
When we're back, the camera stopped recording. We kept talking.
Yeah, we missed about 4 minutes.
And then we had to go somewhere. So we're fast forwarding to this evening. Here they are. It was quite an amazing experience to let our feelings out without any preconceived idea of what the artwork needed to look like, just express our feelings and then work through our feelings. And it was a really transformative experience for me, for sure. And then just the talking about it afterwards, because then we all got to talk about what we went through during that process. And George and I are just committed people, and when we commit to something, we just go all in, and that was definitely something that we experienced going deep into. I was very distraught.
It was nice too how yours and other people as well, the beauty of the positive portion or the liked portion or the second time that we did it, a lot of it came from the tragedy of the first one, and just seeing how beautiful some of that, you know, the interpretation of those things without doing it the first time with the negativity, it wouldn't have been as beautiful or as much of a lesson or learning experience.
After we did that, we moved on to postpartum. And the part of this that was really interesting was, again, inquiry toward what we both expected or thought might be what our life might look like postpartum. And that was definitely not something that I'd thought much about or we had even talked much about, but we each separately did an exercise where we took a piece of a pie, or we took a pie and we divided it up in between where we spend our time now
During the day.
and then how we would spend our time postpartum. And I think the challenging part, we always get into the details. So we were like, well, how much postpartum is this? Is this 3 months? Is this 3 years?
And our work is at home, and like our life and work always kind of intermingle, so it's difficult sometimes for us to say, oh, this amount of time is work and this amount of time is not work.
You know, things that you were like, I really want to make sure I keep time for this, or I really want to let go of this time that I used to spend on this. And to have that conversation with each other is so important, to not have any expectations or unknowns or tension within things, because time is going to be taken from us in ways that we haven't experienced. And it was just so good to talk about that, and we get to go deeper within that, because it was a quick exercise.
The less you communicate, the more possibility you have for resentment to build up, I think.
I just felt so honored that we got to have this experience that was so inquisitive toward not just what to expect with giving birth. You know, it's labeled a childbirth class, but it was so deeper than just the sensations or the physical changes I was going through. It was emotional changes, mental changes, spiritual changes, relationship changes, expectations, and to spend 15 hours of class time, but then so many more homework hours, really focusing on that, not only by myself, but with you, and navigating through that, I think was really special. And I wish everyone to have that kind of inquiry and experience. And it's just, I wouldn't have known it was out there if I didn't experience it from my care provider that I was already working with. You know, I would have just been like, yeah, let me go take a childbirth class. And so I don't know what's out there, but I'm so inspired to share that. Even if it's not a class you do, it's something you can do on your own. And I'm really excited about it. And I think one of the coolest things of this class, and one of the biggest points of how they were both wanting to create the feeling that you leave this class with, is excitement toward labor,
and
not
empowerment.
Fear, and just like excited and feeling empowered and feeling like I'm possible and I can do this and I can do hard things, and yes, it's going to be hard, and I have no idea what it's going to be like, and there's no way for me to really prepare for it, but I believe I can do it, and I'm not afraid of it, and I can see the beauty in it, and I'm just excited.
Hasta luego.
Squish, 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 squish. Okay, bye.